I had never been overweight in my life. I'd never been chronically ill. And now I also had chronic pain coupled with all of this. I had pain so bad in my legs, there were days I couldn't push the gas pedal on my car to get to work. When it came to discovering ice baths as a healing therapy, I was at my wit's end. I am a Florida girl. I grew up in the heat of Florida. I lived in Hawaii. Phoenix summers, those 3-digit temperatures, that's still my favorite time of year. So even 4 years into this practice, I prefer heat, but I know what's good for me. And so I thought, I'm going to try it. I would have tried anything at that point. So I thought, I'm gonna try it. So we set up an ice bath in the backyard. We did a round of Wim Hof breath work, and then I took the plunge. Hello.
Hey. Oh, is the hair different again?
What's that?
Your hair is different again, I think.
It's always different.
Yeah. I don't have that much fun anymore with mine. I need to. All right. Let me make sure we're positioned. Okay, so everybody's been popping on. Kind of pseudo introduced you, but you know how Instagram land is. Many of you are probably here because you know who she is, and some of you she'll be new. These are my face subject. So Jimmy's on
Jimmy.
here. Yeah. So, of course, my dog just started barking.
That's the way of it.
I know. I'm like, it's like, let me outside, but we'll see what happens with this. Everybody, so she, Adrienne takes an interesting perspective. And I'll just say this. We're going to end up talking about cold therapy. And it's very popular right now, which is awesome, but it is not new. So using cold, having deliberate cold exposure with an intention as a therapeutic intervention in the health space is not a new thing. And just because you're just not hearing about it doesn't mean it just started last week. Probably the most famous person around this that's made it so huge is the great Iceman Wim Hof. I mean, I think we have no question about this guy and his superhuman ice conquering. I mean, he holds like an obscene amount of Guinness World Records around the cold. I mean, he's truly extraordinary. If you don't know who that is, please look him up. It's unbelievable. Lots of Guinness World Records for what he's done in the cold. But what intrigued me the most, what captivated me about Wim, was why he went into the cold and how it was post his wife's suicide. And it was from his own grief and psychological trauma of trying to somehow survive as a father alone with a wife gone, that in the tragedy of suicide, that he found his healing in the cold. So that's always been the hook for me around this, even though I know metabolically and physiologically what it can do. But it wasn't until recently, and some of your posts specifically, that kind of really reeled me back in to be like, wait, I've overlooked the cold because I was afraid of it. I know about it, I tell my patients, but I really don't get into this like I should. And you brought it back into my awareness with a post talking about, comparing it with your own trauma and DBT therapy and hypnosis and what the cold did for you. And I was familiar with all of these things because I use them with my patients. And I said, wait a minute, she did that with cold? I need to know more. And it started me on this journey of saying I can no longer ignore this because I can't expect my patients to do something I'm not willing to do. So I'm going to have to do the thing I don't want to do. So for those of you who've been watching, I was doing it anyway. I was doing this about 7 years ago. I ran away from the cold. I'm like, I can't handle it. And I've come back to it. And in a conversation with Adrienne that she generously gave me, she kind of, I think, just brought awareness of something, and it just shifted. Like, oh, this could be related to that trauma. And with that focus, I just could approach it differently mentally. So I think I just want to have that conversation, whether you want to start with telling your story. And I certainly want to get into you describing eventually the Morozko Method, and that she teaches a course. If you want to learn to be trained as an instructor in her method, you could I want you to know about this resource and all of that at the end, or however you want to do it. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you first for having me. It's been a pleasure watching your journey and getting to know you as well. You are an inspiration to me as well. So, thank you. And thanks for having me on today. I'm going to give the condensed version of my story. At 32 years old, I was diagnosed with 3 separate autoimmune conditions. I'd not ever really been sick in my life before. This was not brought on by any one specific event or anything like that. I just started to get sick. I gained about 50 pounds in a year and I got really sick. And so, first diagnosis, Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Second diagnosis, eosinophilic esophagitis. That's where hives present in your esophagus and you have gastrointestinal distress from seasonal allergies, food allergies, which, by the way, I'd never had a single allergy in my life until I got sick. And then all of a sudden, I was allergic to everything. Synthetic fragrance, dyes, eggs, peanuts, bananas, cantaloupe. I mean, just it ran the gamut of the things that I was becoming allergic to. And the third diagnosis was urticaria, where the outside of my body turned into a hive as a result of the things that I was allergic to. And over the course of about 4 years, I ended up seeing several specialists. I tried the naturopath route. I tried the acupuncture and the detoxes and the cleanses. And in my year 4, at that point, at the highest point of my illness, I was taking more than 20 vitamins, supplements, and prescription medications every day and 2 live antibody shots per month from my allergist. And I did not get relief. There wasn't anything that was helping me feel better. So despite all of these pills and despite the live antibody shots, I was still about this close from being put in a bubble. I couldn't fly. I couldn't go to a movie theater. I couldn't sit in a restaurant if I was too close to another table. Heaven forbid somebody's perfume set me off. And I was at my wit's end. I had never been overweight in my life. I'd never been chronically ill. And now I also had chronic pain coupled with all of this. I had pain so bad in my legs. There were days I couldn't push the gas pedal on my car to get to work. And when it came to discovering ice baths as a healing therapy, I was at my wit's end. I am a Florida girl. I grew up in the heat of Florida. I lived in Hawaii. Phoenix summers, those 3-digit temperatures, that's still my favorite time of year. So even 4 years into this practice, I prefer heat, but I know what's good for me. And so I thought, I'm going to try it. I would have tried anything at that point. So I thought, I'm going to try it. So we set up an ice bath in the backyard. We did a round of Wim Hof breath work, and then I took the plunge. I hovered over the tub, put my hands on each side, put my feet on each side. I dropped myself in because there was no way I could have voluntarily at that point in my life just stepped into an ice bath. So I dropped myself in. I held my breath under the water. Turns out that's 9 seconds. And I leapt out. I freaked out and noticed the pain in my legs was gone for the first time in years. And I also felt a sense of empowerment like I'd never felt before. Like I just did that. I didn't care that it was 9 seconds. I just did that. And it felt so good that I knew I would do it again. Not that day, but I knew I would do it again. And I continued to do it. So at this point in time, before Morozko Forge, before the availability of an at-home personal use ice bath was even thought of, we were making our own ice and still buying ice. So I was only getting ice baths about once a week. And it was probably my 3rd or 4th ice bath that I stood in front of it and was gripped by fear. The anxiety of taking the ice bath, of getting into the water, had me gripped. And so I'm standing there thinking, I know this is good for me. I know I need this. I know I'm going to feel good afterward, but how do I move through this practice? And that's when dialectical behavioral therapy came back to me. When you're anxious, ground yourself with the 5 senses. What is something you can see? What's something you can smell? What's something you can taste, touch, here. And as I'm standing there moving through that experience, I just decided I'm getting in. And this was from some encouragement from my business partner, Tom. And, he's like, Adrienne, what if you just stepped in? And I did. I stepped in. I sat down. I leaned back and I breathed. And I don't know how long that ice bath was. It was definitely longer than any that I had taken prior to that. But I discovered that this anxiety I was feeling before stepping into the ice wasn't real. It was fear of the future based on a past event and something that hadn't even happened. So why am I standing next to the ice in fear? Also knowing that it's so good for me. So I took my ice bath in my mindful meditative way. And as I continued through this practice, I started noticing health benefits. For one, the weight started melting off. I mean, literally the ice was melting the weight off of my body. And in the first year, I lost all 50 pounds. Within less than 2 years, I was able to remove every single vitamin, supplement, and prescription medication from my regimen. When I went into my endocrinologist for my annual labs, I did not tell her that I was not taking any of my life-saving medications. I just had her read my labs and tell me, how do I seem? She says, you're doing great. Everything is within range. You're healthy as a horse. She says, I can't believe, you, and I'm paraphrasing here. She's like, I can't believe you lost any weight. Like, this doesn't happen with anyone with a thyroid condition, specifically Hashimoto's. She's like, so whatever you're doing, keep it up. And I told her, I said, well, I stopped all the medication. I'm taking ice baths. And she's like, great. I'll make a note in your file. I hope I never have to see you again. And I walk out of her office and I walk through a waiting room full of women who are overweight, unhealthy, miserable. And I began to get very angry. Over the course of a few days, I began to get very angry. And I couldn't figure out at first, why am I angry? What about this is making me angry? And I realized this was a woman who told me that if I wasn't taking my medication, I would die. This was someone who told me that I needed to be on this medication to save my life and that I would be on it for the rest of my life. So when I told her that I was standing there with clear labs right in front of her and it was a result of ice baths, not medication, why am I not considered a medical marvel? Why is that not considered a miracle? And I realized it's going to be up to me to shout the healing benefits of the cold from the rooftops. And that's what I've been doing for the last 4 years, is sharing this practice with absolutely anyone who will listen, sharing my journey with anyone who will listen, guiding anyone through an ice bath who would allow me to. And through this practice of guiding others through the ice bath, I realized that there needs to be just a little bit more mindful intention. So I continued to build on my guided practice of how to get someone through the freezing cold, the fight or flight response, submerged to the neck at 33 degrees for 2 whole minutes. So I use the sensory immersion, mindfulness meditation, little bit of hypnosis, and I do teach this as a method. And I realized as much as I appreciate Wim Hof and his breath work and what he has designed, it wasn't for me. That high energy, competitive, holotropic, like just challenging energy. I had spent the first 30 some odd years of my life in that energy. I didn't need that energy anymore. I needed to find a way to move through this experience with calm, nurturing surrender. So I like to refer to the Wim Hof method as the yang energy and the Morozko method as the yin energy. So it is dropping in, slowing down, moving through this discomfort with calm. And what I discovered was by doing that, I was then carrying this practice with me throughout other aspects of my life. Once I started sharing it with other people and guiding other people through the cold with this method, I was hearing the same stories from them, that their stress was easier to manage, their emotions were easier to manage. Suddenly I'm being cut off in traffic, and instead of, throwing up some obscenities and screaming, I'm taking deep breath and reminding myself what it was like when my teenagers learned how to drive and realizing, well, I've cut somebody off in traffic before. Nobody's injured. It's all okay. And so all these different things in my life started to change, even outside of the cold. And I do know that there you get this surge of norepinephrine and dopamine. And I believe that that is really what keeps me coming back for more. That's what I think creates instant ice addicts, is that surge of feel-good chemicals. It does help slow everything down. It also helps smooth over hardwired pathways, hardwired neural pathways of trauma. And then you're creating tens of thousands of new neural pathways from a place of meditative calm while dumping copious amounts of norepinephrine and dopamine into your brain. So it was changing my brain. It was changing the way that I functioned and the way that I coped emotionally. I believe that that was really the catalyst for my healing. Partly that, and then also I think autoimmune, this is my opinion, autoimmune is like a dog without a job. It's attacking the body on the inside because I'm not giving it anything on the outside to fight against. And so as soon as I started taking ice baths, it was like, whoa, wait a minute. We got a job to do here. We have to keep you alive. And so through this process, and in less than 2 years, I reversed all autoimmune. I lost the weight. I got off the medication, and I'm changing my brain. I'm changing the way that I'm reactive, and instead I'm becoming responsive. And I think the reason that the cold helps with everything is because the first thing it helps is the way that your brain functions and the way that you think about what it is you're going through. It helped me move from that chronically ill, chronically in pain, victim mentality of this is just the life that I live now, to feeling empowered and feeling like, wait a minute, this is my body, this is my responsibility, and I have the power to heal. We all have the power to heal. We don't do it as fast as Wolverine, but I tell you what, you give yourself a little bit of patience and the right tools, you will heal your body. So here I am, 4+ years into my practice. Do I love taking ice baths? No! I stand in front of it still and hesitate for a moment. And I know that on the other side is peace. I know on the other side is healing. I know if I'm moving through a difficult emotional experience, or if I have a hard conversation I'm going to have, or if I'm in a high stress experience, oh, hey, I'm an entrepreneur here. This is what's going to help me through that without having those extreme emotional reactions. So it's completely changed my life. And now my mission is to shout the healing benefits from the rooftops. Everybody should give this a try.
Okay. So thank you. Beautiful story. I've heard most of that before. There were definitely some new nuggets. I could pick apart details, but I think the last phrase with everybody should give this a try. I think that's a good place to start, because definitely when I bring this up, whether it's on social media or to a patient, I get a very quick pushback of, but. I have a thyroid disorder. I have a this. What about stroke? What about a heart? What about this? My hands are so cold. I have Raynaud's and blah, 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 blah. Okay. And that's actually when I dropped a post and said, hey, drop some questions. That's a big one where who shouldn't do it? Like like the fear of, wait a minute, this is dangerous, danger. And I kind of look at it as like, how can I find the way out? Can I be that exception? Can I please be the exception? I was very happy that years ago, Jack Roots told me not to cold. I was like, thank you, God. He goes, oh no, it's not really that important for you right now because you're blah, blah, blah. 80 is cold. I'm like, oh, thank you, because it is cold to me. Now, that being said, it's because I was sick. I was acutely ill. Right? So there's a very different, and it doesn't mean he said cold isn't good for me. He said, but you need to concentrate more on the sun. You need to be concentrating on the heat. You need to move. I mean, that's Jack will tell you, you got to move. You can't live there. I don't know how your Indian black asses in Atlanta basically go south. I was like, okay, Jack, I don't know how to do that, but okay. So it doesn't mean I couldn't do the cold, and it didn't mean you're right. So that's a big one. Let's talk about that, like, is there somebody that shouldn't be doing the cold? And and you're like, no, but like, talk a little bit, because people are, I'm sure you've heard everything at this point.
I've given everything.
How many people have you guided at this point?
Thousands. I mean, I'm in the multiple thousands. And the only person that I would not put in an ice bath is someone with a pacemaker. That's the only person that I would not put in an ice bath. And that's just because, number one, I don't understand pacemakers. Number two, it just seems counterintuitive. I don't know why, and it freaks me out a little bit. I have never once met someone that this would not be good for, period. And I've heard it all. I've heard, well, I'm trying to conceive. Well, let me tell you how many women I know conceived within 2 weeks of starting an ice bath practice. Some of them after trying for years. Or I am pregnant, and so maybe it's not good for me. I've not had my own babies. My babies are bonus babies from another mother. I don't know what that's like, but what I can tell you is if it's good for you, it's likely good for the baby. And you don't have to go full bore. You can just get uncomfortable. I think the idea is to find some peace through the discomfort. So anything below 55 degrees is going to have an effect. And if you're uncomfortable and you have to breathe through that, you are training yourself for cold exposure. You're training yourself in deliberate cold exposure. I've met people, we have an article on our website about a woman who has cured her Raynaud's. And the first thing that doctors tell you about Raynaud's is, oh, Raynaud's is caused by cold. That causes pain. Avoid the cold.
Right.
No.
Just like they have they have a totally flawed philosophy that, oh, you have lupus, now you should stay out of the sun. No, pumpkin. The lack of sun is what caused the lupus, right? So if you have an intolerance to cold, it's because you've been avoiding the cold.
Yes.
So I was that.
And yes,
I was that
and
person.
Those people that say, oh, I freeze at 70 degrees. Me too, before I started deliberate cold exposure.
Right. Yeah.
And, oh, I hate the cold. I grew up in Wisconsin, blah, 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 blah. What is your relationship to it? Think about what your relationship to it is. What is this emotion coming up in you? And how bad do you want to feel well? At that point in my life, I would have put leeches all over my body if I'd have known that would make me feel well, but it wouldn't have. So when I was learning about ice baths and the way that it jumpstarts your immune system and stimulates your metabolism, helps with mood regulation and stress, I was like, this is worth a try. And I went kicking and screaming. Even my first ice bath, dropping myself in violently, I went through this practice kicking and screaming. Here I am 4+ years in. I still go through it kicking and screaming sometimes, and it's good for me. You can't build a bicep without tearing a muscle.
Right. Yeah. Even people who like to go to the gym sometimes don't want to. They're like, I really don't want to lift today. I just don't. But you do it anyway. You're like, okay.
And do you ever regret it afterward?
Right.
Like on the other side of the workout, on the other side of the ice bath, on the other side of the mountain that you hiked, do you regret it on the other side? I don't. And that's partly what keeps me coming back for more.
So let me ask you, people are going to be, that are listening right now, are like, wait, she lost 50 pounds in a year? Excuse me? Say what? What is that? And this is a real thing. I have a whole, again, for me, Jack Cruz is who I really learned about this from about 7-8 years ago. And that's how he lost a ton of weight. He's like, I just packed myself in ice. He's like, believe it or not, ice packing, ice plunging, cold thermogenesis. He would do crazy things like sleep for 12 hours. I mean, he would pack himself in the tub. He'd have his wife keep packing ice on him for like 8 hours. Now he has a whole.
Oh my God! I'm only asking for 2 minutes, people.
I know. So this is what I'm saying. But he was like, I'm a big fat ass surgeon, and I blew up my knee because he had like 200 pounds to lose or something crazy. So he tells his own story. Like, yep, I was a hot mess, and a woman came up to him and was like, you need to learn some new things because after he blew out his knee, literally blew it out just standing up because he was obese, and he was like, this is not gonna work for me. So he packed himself with ice, and cold thermogenesis makes you lose fat better than anything else. Better than exercise, you guys, better than diet. And there's a real physiological reasons for that. I actually have a whole like free thing. If you send me a message, I'll send you the videos or PDF on this cold thermogenesis and how it's better for fat loss than anything else. Not saying you shouldn't watch what you eat, not saying you shouldn't exercise. I'm just saying if you're trying to lose fat and you're having any weight loss resistance and you are not doing this, I don't want to hear your whining when you make an appointment with me, because this will be the thing I'm telling you to do. And they fight me, Adrienne, months after months sometimes. And they keep wanting me to give them a new supplement. I'm like, there's no new supplement, pumpkin. Like,
There's no
what do you,
pill.
I don't know what to tell you. You already, like, I've told you. This is it. I'm done. You really want to go down the $500 a month peptide route? Like, seriously, this is what you'd rather be injecting yourself and spending? We haven't even done the cold yet. I mean, okay. So 50 pounds in a year. How often were you doing that, really, do you think, at that point?
So in the first couple of months, it was only about once a week. But within the first six or seven, maybe 8 months, at that point, Jason and Tom had invented the 24/7 ice bath. So we had the first ugly prototype here in my backyard, and it was ready to go 24/7.
Okay.
Then it became daily, like almost daily. Obviously, I'd miss a day here and there. Sometimes it would be more than once a day or several times a day. Specifically, if I had an allergic reaction and I would turn into a hive, I would go straight home. I'd get right in the ice. I'd sit there as long as it took for that inflammation to go away. And then I knew for sure I was onto something, because I would take a picture of me before looking like this red, puffy strawberry. And then I would sit in the ice for 4 to 5 minutes. I would get out and the inflammation would be gone. The symptoms of my reaction, my allergic reaction, would be gone. And even when it came to the gastric distress from EOE, I would, instead of like a 5 to 10 day recovery, it was now 3 to 5. And then it was 1 to 3. And I don't know how inflammation plays into weight. I don't know how that works, but I do know that the reduction of inflammation was part of what completely shrunk me.
Yeah.
That reduction of inflammation, it's like the cold knows where to go. Even now.
Except the fat, I get very, very briefly, the fat is there to protect you. The fat is storing the toxic poisons of inflammation, but it becomes this vicious circle where it's kind of reinstigating itself. It's keeping itself. Fat is an endocrine gland, and basically you made your, it's like, well, so is the thyroid, but should it be 8 times its normal size? No. It should not. So nor should your body fat. Okay, because now you have an endocrine gland that's gotten too big and it's producing way too many hormonal signals than it should. So it is there in consequence trying to protect. As you have a problem, it's going to keep getting bigger to store the poisons to keep them away from your brain and your heart. Ultimately, it's what it's trying to do. So the two go together, right? As you cleanse and detox or and bring the path, you know, wherever the inflammation is coming from. Let's say it's an underlying infection. If we get rid of that, magically weight goes away. Which is like, people will want to say, well, could you think it could be H. pylori? Can't we just test me for that? Like, they want me seriously to run labs and do no, honey, you're going in a cold plunge.
You don't
really can
want
do it.
H. pylori. You don't want SIBO.
But they think, maybe I have a sickness. And I'm like, oh no, you just actually have poor thermoregulation because you're avoiding discomfort so much. And that's what we've done to ourselves, right? With our homes and our central heat and our central air, this stressor that we would have normally gone through. And like they say, pregnant women, I hate to tell you, but primal women went through all kinds of stressors, pregnant and everything else. And it was a part
and
of
try
the
living
process.
in Phoenix in summertime, being 8
that's what I was
months
gonna
pregnant.
say. I just want to say, like, she actually lives in Arizona where it's like 128,000. Like, I have friends literally send me pictures of like, girl, look at what my thing is. You know, it's so hot. So doing it 2-3 times a day when it's 120 outside certainly does make sense. So somebody else living in Detroit, you may not need to do it that frequently. Like, you know, I love, you know, Dr. Susanna Soberger was on here. Soberger, I'm not sure she's still on here, has looked at the minimum kind of effective dose. Is 12 minutes a week, right? Yeah. That's a very doable. When you say to somebody like, oh, I'm like, so that's the minimum effective dose. You can do more, and there's always a way to overdo anything, right? Like heat exposure can be too much, cold exposure can be too much, exercise
can be too much of any good thing.
Exactly. You can drink too much water and kill yourself. It happens all the time with people on ecstasy. That's how they usually die. So, in case you didn't know. So, you know, it's people have to, there's that sweet spot, but you want to know what's the minimum dose. And then what's the goal you're going for? Like maintenance is not the same as healing something, you guys. So what you do for maintenance in a gym is not the same as, okay, I'm trying to repair a after hip surgery, right? It's going to be harder and take more effort. Cold is no different. But 12 minutes is a week split into, if you think this is very doable. I personally do think, so I usually guide my patients. I'm like, we're going to shoot for 3 times a week. However, I think when you start, I mean, for me mentally, I had to do something every day. I couldn't,
To build the habit.
anticipatory, to build a habit and the anticipatory anxiety. I had to be approaching it like, I don't care if you just get in and get out. Like, you just need to get in. I have to do it, because I had so much emotional fear around it, which I'm sure a lot of people probably who follow me have that as well, because why wouldn't you? Because we resonate, right? We're tuning forks. I was petrified of this. And I've been through many a thing in my life where some people would break. I'm like, I'm not afraid of that shit. Bring it. Let's go. But and I told you, I'm like, what's happening with me in the cold? Why am I so weak? And it made sense. It actually tied back to, something that happened when I was a kid and how I kind of got beat up and all this kind of long story. But, and you pointed that out. I went, oh. And so it actually, just for me to know, it brought kind of some forgiveness to myself. I was like, oh, you're just scared because of what those boys did to you in the snow. And that makes a whole lot of sense.
And that emotion sticks around.
Yep.
We store that in our muscle tissue. We store trauma in our muscle tissue, which is another reason that the cold is so beneficial for trauma healing. So Huberman talks a whole thing about to shiver or not to shiver and how it helps us. And if we get out of an ice bath and we allow our body to shiver, for one, we're creating a lot of energy within the body and we're burning additional fat. So that's great. Also, if we allow ourselves to shiver, we're releasing that pent up trauma, that stored trauma in our muscle memory. Yep. We're releasing it. There's also a benefit to breathing calmly and suppressing the shiver. So what I'm learning too is that if you suppress the shiver response, you are also teaching yourself how to build emotional resilience. You are becoming stronger than your body's physical responses. Your mental is becoming stronger than your body's physical response. So when I get in an ice bath and I am not activating fight or flight, that's fine. But if I am activating fight or flight, I want to breathe calmly through that. I'm in charge here, not the monkey brain. I'm in charge here. So yeah,
I love that. So first of all, you guys, the shiver and the shaking, we've talked about this on your Q&A you had before. And I told you about, trauma release exercises. So Trey is a form of shaking. It's a therapy is saying, you do very intentional exercises in a very specific order and they're shaking. I've added shaking after I get out, just intentionally. So I'm not really getting a shiver response, which is stunning, right? Because any of you who saw this at 80 degrees, I was screaming F-bombs in my bathtub. Okay. Next time was 70. And I'm like, oh, it's not as bad. Then I went to 60. I'm like, oh, it's not so bad. And I mean, I think it was pretty quickly. It was 45, right? And now with 38, there's nothing. I mean, I'm literally so, I mean, it's not so bad. I'm like, I've sit out there well, how long am I supposed to do this though? I got things to do. I mean, I kind of can't believe it. The other day, it was 35. That's the coldest I've done, just because of getting the ice and what's a pain. And I'm like, I get it. And I'm like, it's still that warm? Oh my God, I didn't have enough ice. And it wasn't even anything.
We build our resilience. And we build our resilience.
You really build it, you guys. If you're watching, I swear, and I tell them, you don't have to go, I get it, what you do. You lead these. I've never done a guided weekend or a guided session. I've never gone through that whole thing. I understand those are very different. I've done lots of group courses of experiential things. You can do all kinds of things in a group you can't normally do on your own. How I do breath work is different. It's all different. The group, meditation is crazy, So I tell them, when you're doing it home alone, I'm like, let's start. I start them slow. I'm like, if they're terrified like me, I'm like, hey, let's do. Yeah, most Black people are like, girl. I'm like, good. Let's go to 80. And they're like, okay. I'm like, you're gonna scream, but you'll be okay. So I work it just like me. But other people, I'm like, I tell them, like, you can do 50, like, no problem. I can tell, right? So I kind of gauge it in my sessions, like where they should start. But some
You're
are
so
like you.
nice. I don't care who
I
you
know,
are.
you
You
push
come to
them
me, I'm
right
going
to
right
it.
in at 32.
I know, you push them, but listen, it's different. Now, do you do that in a virtual way where they're even alone? Because I don't. I feel like if I'm not there, I'm pretty gentle about it.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm
Because it was
not
so hard
there,
for me.
I do have the online delivered cold exposure meditations, which help. So it
They're
feels like I'm
awesome.
there, even
I
if I'm
love
not.
them. Yeah, I love
Yep.
them.
And if you are alone, start at whatever temperature makes you uncomfortable. The idea is to experience discomfort
Yeah,
and allow yourself to move through it without kicking and screaming the whole way. If you're
right,
kicking and screaming the whole way, you're missing the whole point anyway. So
right.
start at whatever temperature is uncomfortable for you and continue to decrease that. Ben
Right.
Greenfield says 55 or below for real health benefits. I say if you're uncomfortable, you're doing the work, because any amount of cold is a good amount of cold.
Yeah. Any discomfort is going to help with the emotional trauma situation and your ability to control yourself. So again, if that's 70 for you, if you really are in a very have a very dysregulated thyroid, shivering cold all the time, Raynaud's, and we have to start there. I was uncomfortable. I used to do 70. That's what cruise. I mean, and that was cold enough. And I would, like, 5-10 minutes. I'm like, I'm done. And I would, be chattering,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not anymore. And my house used to keep it at like 75, right? Now I keep my house at like 66. I mean, literally my son is like, Mom, I
Take an
can't
ice bath. It'll
believe
be
this.
really
Like,
warm afterward.
yeah, he's like this. And I've been working on this for a while, Lauren. The temperature, going outside, cold exposure, cold vests, doing lots of things to get, because what did I know? The fact that I needed it this hot was a sign of my own poor thermal regulation. Right? Have a thyroid disorder. This is from 12 years as a vegan, eating a lot of soy and gluten. I destroyed my thyroid, am on replacement, but I've cut my support down dramatically, like it's a quarter of what it used to be. And so, like, I'm like, maybe it can be totally healed. I mean, because the last time my physician was like, dude, your thyroid woke up. I'm like, I know, right? And this girl, I'm still working on it. She's like, you're really trying. I said, I really am trying, but I also knew replace when something's wrong, replace it so I can function. And it happened right, before I got pregnant. So it was like, oh no, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm gentle about people getting into it. Again, it's uncomfortable, but the physiological, because I've seen questions in here, the big physiological benefits, typically the number we say is 59 degrees. There's research will show 58. You can still get inflammation benefits. Now you might have to be in that for an hour to get benefit at 58 degrees though, okay,
Yeah.
for it to really to do what it needs to do. I don't have an hour to sit around in a 59 degree. I want to be in and out. Give me 2-3. I like fast. I like to do sprint work. I don't want to do marathons. I got no
I
time
also
for
like
3 hours.
instant gratification. I don't know any one of us that doesn't.
Yeah,
And
if you're going to feel it, the colder it is, the faster you're going to feel it.
Faster
That's
and
just
stronger.
the truth. So yeah, you need to know that. So if somebody was in here, I'm doing it at 60. Again, if it's not really uncomfortable for you, you're not really doing as much work. It's kind of like exercise. I'm like, well, if walking, you're like, that's not really doing anything. You're doing 5 pounds. It's nothing, right? What would Ben Greenfield do lifting 20 pounds? Nothing. It's nothing to him. It's not a stressor. Right? But in general, you guys, sometimes those numbers come around. You're like 55 and under. 55 to 35 is going to be these potent inflammation, hormonal changes. 35 to 32 or so, like severe extreme fat loss, kind of is what we say.
And it all depends on what you're working on. The protocol for you is going to be different than the protocol for me. And the protocol for you this week may be different than next week. So as we move through this practice, there will be days that are harder than others. There will be days we need it more. There will be times, like you said, you may have to hit it hard in the beginning, and then after a while, it's just maintenance.
Right. Yep. Again, and for me, if you're starting, I do think the mental game of just some consistency. I mean, even when I have patients like starting to work out, I'm like, you need to I don't care if you walk in that gym and you're, open it up and say, I'm here, and then you walk out, but I need this habit created. So for me, just in and out. But then it became, well, I can stay longer. I mean, the next thing you know, I'm like, have I been here 15 minutes,
And you start to crave it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm going to do it. I was debating. I was really running kind of busy late, and I'm like, "Ooh, can I do it right before?" And I'm like, "Oh, then I'll be cold and I'll be wet." And I'm like, "I'll do it after." So
I
I'm
guided a session
stunned that I
right
like
before
it.
this, but I'm going to
Yeah,
go do a session after this.
yeah. Say it's. I mean, you talked to me. Do you remember this private conversation? And like now, I'm like the other morning, I was like, "Oh shit, there's ice." I was like, "Okay, I haven't had coffee, but I'm going to do it." I did it before coffee.
I saw it.
I'm a little bit like, who is this person right now? But I was like, that's just like, how can you not do it? There's already ice in it. And that's when it was the coldest. It was 5. Somebody asked the question about how do you measure the water temperature? I like your answer on this. I've seen you talk about it.
Yeah, I don't like those point and shoot thermometers because they're going to go to a spot. It's not actually going to get the temperature of the water. And I use a digital temperature thermometer. So anything that is waterproof is going to be fine. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
I
So
stick my hand in.
there's pool ones, you
You
guys,
can
and
do
like
cool ones.
they float, you know, and the water temperature will be a little bit different,
Yeah,
top to
based on the top to the
bottom.
bottom. And if you really want a true reading, just make sure you mix up that water a little bit before you go and do your reading, and then you'll really know. But the point and click, those infrared ones, the ones where it's like point and click and it shoots the little red dot, they just aren't accurate. They're going to point to a certain spot. They're going to give you the temperature of whatever that particular spot is, and it's not going to be accurate. But there are also digital temperature thermometers that are designed for this. So Inkbird makes one that you can actually have like right there in the water. It can hang right in the water and it'll digitally tell you exactly what the temperature is.
Would you say Inkbird? Is that what you said?
Inkbird, yeah.
Okay, I
Inkbird.
haven't heard of that. I'm looking to see if there's something. So let's talk about, it's not about compare and contrast, but people are always, so they see me doing it and they assume I'm doing Wim Hof. Yeah. And I will say I mean, I think the guy is like, I mean, what is there to say?
I know he's amazing.
Like
he's amazing.
Like, wow. I would totally actually, I said it a couple years ago. I'm like, look, maybe one day I will go to Poland and do that whole thing with him. Like maybe I'm going to do this as I'm reading the books, like freezing on my biomat, getting out of my sauna. Like, I want to do this one day. And that was really more for me. It was like, I will mentally win this thing with cold eventually. And so I did start with the cold showers. I did like 47 days straight in a row. The only reason it broke is because I was in Vegas and the water was just not cold. I was like, this, I mean, it's on cold, but I know this doesn't really count because this is ridiculous, right? Because it's so hot. So I did all that. And then I will say, people always ask, I think the plunging is so much easier than the showers. I hate cold showers. I think it's the most miserable. I never felt good from them. I never felt great. I never felt invigorated.
I don't like to be locally pelted with 70-degree water. It feels
like, I'm like, it's miserable. I hate it versus getting in the actual water and getting out completely different.
I would rather sit calmly in 33-degree water than be pelted with 70.
Yeah, that's how I feel. I hate it. So if you like cold showers, they're great. Use them. If some people love them, enjoy them. You absolutely get cold benefits. It's not as good as going in, the best would be swimming in real cold water, swimming in a river or a lake, no doubt, because you're getting grounding and everything.
I love a nature plunge. Just make sure and bring a buddy. Don't go below the waist or don't go above the waist, and make sure you have clean, dry clothes to put on afterward.
There you go. I've never done it, and I would never do it by myself, and I'm not to that place. So I've never done a Wim Hof weekend. I've never gone through that, but I did buy his online course. Yep. I did do it. I went through, and I've probably done before him, I've done at least 100, if not more. I've been doing breath work since I was 27, August 2000. I know it's my very first. So I've done it in group courses, private sessions with a therapist. I've done a ton of breath work. I love breath work, and I'm terrified every single time I'm going to do it. I'm like, it's this thing. I'm like, I don't know why I know what's going to happen, but I might go through all that but I go through that whole thing, and then I'm going to cry, and then I'm going to laugh, and the whole thing is going to be a whole messy thing.
And it's physically hard.
It's physically very, very hard, but I've done it. You use whole sessions for hours. So when I try, and so I know that, but when I tried to do his breathing at home alone, I couldn't. It was like terrifying. It was uncomfortable. I didn't feel safe. I didn't like it at all. I'm like, I can't, I'm not doing this. And whether it's by myself, I don't know, but that was my experience. So I've never really done, I said, I don't like it. People say, I just don't like it, you guys. I don't want to do it. That's all I can tell you. I don't feel safe.
Yeah.
So I do understand what his breathing is doing from a physiological aspect. I understand how you're getting really actually hypercapnic is bringing a lot of CO2 into you. And so contrasting that with what you do, right? Let's talk about this method, because there might be some people on here who want to take your training to, you know, experience you, or they'll be like, you know what, I want to become a practitioner. I've been doing this for 2 years on my own, and I never thought that I could actually help other people, but why don't I become an instructor? And, you know, so there might be some people watching that would want to know the difference. Kind of, how would you categorize, and again, it's not really comparing, but
I would categorize Wim Hof as breath work. It is breath work. It's holotropic, it's hyperventilative, it's aggressive, and it's that's not what I do before the cold. Everything that I guide myself, my clients, everything I teach is to meet the cold with stoicism and grace, is to move through this process with calm, mindful intention. So whatever you need to do prior to getting in, I want it to be slow, calm, and intentional. So if I'm standing next to the tub and I'm all by myself, I'm taking deep, powerful, slow belly breaths. Into the belly, not into the chest. If you're into the chest, you're still in the head. If you're into the belly, you're really activating your lungs. You're really activating the parasympathetic. You're calming yourself down before you ever step in. And that's my greatest advice. Make sure you're calm before you step into the cold, so that when you do sit down and you begin to hyperventilate, you're already familiar with how to change the breath. I've been told by a lot of women that it mimics labor breathing because it's and you want to slow it down. If you can breathe calmly through your fight or flight response, you will carry that superpower with you throughout the rest of your life. So the number one thing I say is to meet the cold with calm, to get rid of the anxiety, leave it outside of the tub. Take your deep breaths and calm and ground yourself before stepping in. I also think it's important to set your intention. And that might be different day to day. It might be the same intention every time. But what is that intention that's going to keep you in when your body and your brain says, get the heck out? What are you going to do to remind yourself of why you're here completing this practice? If you want the most experience of what my guided sessions look like and what you will learn in the Morozko Method workshop, go to Morozko Forge, YouTube, meditation playlists, and go to the meditation playlist. Just pick one. They're by 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, or an intention. And you just press play. You listen to everything that I tell you to do and create ceremony around this. Light some sage, light some candles, set up some incense. Give yourself something to look at when you're sitting in the tub. Mine at home, mine sits outside. So I've got this beautiful tree, and I've got the clouds, and I've got the sky, and I've got the grass, and often my cat comes by and she talks to me while I'm in there. Or if I'm at the spa, I've got the aromatherapy. I've got the special lighting. I'll even turn the red light on and give myself that false impression of feeling like I'm warm, even if I'm not. So set the right music. Set yourself a tone. Treat this as your self-care practice, because that's exactly what that is. So the more mindfulness and intention that you can bring to this practice, the easier it will be for you to move through the most difficult part of it, which is that initial shock of hyperventilation in the first 30 to 45, sometimes up to 60 seconds before that norepinephrine and dopamine kick in. But you are in charge of your breath. You are in charge. You are in charge of learning how to breathe. One thing I learned through this practice was that I had no idea how to breathe. I would walk around holding my breath so many times throughout the day. No wonder I was wound so tight. So just teaching ourselves how to manage our anxiety, breathe into the belly, and understand that when we hyperventilate, we still have that tool. That breath is with us wherever we go.
This is true. You're truly, it's more than the phrase said, how to manage your anxiety. You're controlling your nervous system.
Yes.
You're the one that's in direct control. And we forget that we really can do this. And because of things like calling things autoimmune, which I think is total bullshit, makes a person a victim. Makes you a very disempowered victim. See, you have no control. I mean, you're so deranged, your body can't even like do an immune thing. I mean, look at that. I mean, and you got to be on this for life because your body is so stupid, it can't tell self from other. Welcome to your chronic illness. So I call bullshit on that whole concept. And there's ways, this is a way of restoring the body's ability to have coherence is what I would call it. Everything knows who it is, it knows its name, and it knows its job. I love your dog analogy of like, it's like this puppy that has all this work. And I always say it's like a puppy that just hasn't been trained. It doesn't know what's name or what to do. That's what it really is, right? It's like, once you know your purpose, then your life has changed, right? And that's macro. Once you know your purpose, everything changes, and you know, like yours now, right? So it's that control of basically, you guys, what you're saying is like you're setting yourself up like, okay, I'm afraid to do this thing. I'm going to purposely go into this thing. And I'm getting anxious. I'm going to learn to, with my breath, which is controlling the vagal response, which is activating your parasympathetic rest and digest to override a fight or flight response. You bring it down. It's not to say I'm never a little bit nervous when I step in. You guys, please know that. Don't sit there and wait until you have no anxiety.
No, be afraid and do it anyway.
It's gonna get worse. There are times I'm like, you know what I mean? You're gonna have to just do it, right? From the power pose and the breathing, and then get in. But I love that idea of how the calm, and that to me, that's when I went, that's the thing, that's the trauma, that's the control of the brain. So then you go in, you guys, and it's a massive fight or flight response. It's like you fell into a lake, and that's what your body's supposed to do. Ramp her up so she can swim to the top, because this ain't good. Danger, 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 danger. Okay? And then your job is in this, it's not danger. I'm going to boom right here. And you calm it right down through that breath, through that intention. You activate your vagus nerve again that way. And you know, even you guys, when she sighed, it's important that that is actually calming you down more than breathing quietly, because it activates here vagus response, rest and digest. Okay, we've kind of shut ourselves up as if we're not allowed to. Kids go, oh, mom, and I'm like that, and we tell them to shut up. But like, actually, they're calming themselves down. Let them do it. Let them moan, right? So then you're controlling your nervous system, your brain, and everything to go, wait, I'm not. There's danger, but I'm in control. That is going to translate all over the place, everywhere, right? Because we think we're in danger all the time, whether that's how am I going to pay the mortgage this month, you know, or, oh shit, that dude's chasing me. You know what I mean? Like, it can be down to, oh, how do you respond when your boss does something? How do you respond when your husband or wife says something, when your kids do something, when your mother calls you? You know what I mean? Like, any of those dangerous signals where you're like, the little kid's like, ah! Suddenly, what she's saying is you will respond in those other situations. The idea is to put yourself in uncomfortable, this is putting yourself in an uncomfortable place on purpose to learn to control yourself in that great discomfort. So when discomfort comes up, when you're not expecting it, you handle it much better.
This is your controlled environment where you get to re-experience this trauma from a place of safety, and you get to be the one to determine that.
Have you seen people crying and doing things? Because I have, it happened to me. Like, it was like, what? Why am I wanting to cry? Like it feels so different.
Yep.
I'm like, what was that all about? You know?
Yeah.
So let's prepare them. They might have some emotional release.
Yeah.
And it's okay.
And it's okay. It's okay if you cry. It's okay if you laugh.
Good.
I try not to scream when I'm in there. I don't want to do anything aggressive when I'm in there. And I'm glad that you touched on the power pose. The other thing that I advise is when you step out of the cold, I want you to be empowered. I want you to create a physical muscle memory of this experience that reminds you how strong you are. And that's why I say when you step out of the cold, stand in power pose, just like Wonder Woman or Superman. You put your hands in fists on your hips with your thumbs pointing behind you. Your feet are spread a little wider than hip distance apart. Your chest is out, your shoulders are back, your chin is up, and you breathe. I do not want you to get out of the cold, grab a towel and wrap up in it and freak out like, ah, it's so cold and blah, 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 blah. You're creating a physical muscle memory of anxiety if you do that.
Right.
So to me, the most important thing is when you step out, step into your power. And that's actually called arms akimbo. And they nickname it power pose because if you stand that way for 2 minutes, you will invoke chemicals that create calm and confidence in the brain. So that's a trick that you can use outside of the ice bath, nowhere near the ice bath. If you're feeling dysregulated, stand in power pose for 2 minutes and tell me you don't feel stronger. So that is one of the biggest parts of the Morozko Method is when you step out of the cold, step into your empowerment, own it, feel your body shiver, feel your heat coming from the back of the base of your neck and wrapping all around you. Feel your breath deep into your belly. Watch how all the colors and your vision suddenly gets clear and sharp and bright and your mind and your thoughts and everything starts to calm down. That's all part of it. It's all part of the practice. What we do outside of the ice is just as important as what we're doing inside of the ice.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I think, that's a good place to stop. And I think, guys, the YouTube channel, those guided meditations, Adrienne, I have them now. They're like one of my notes in my healthcare, my thing out for patients. I'm like, there it is. Here's the list. Here's the playlist. I have them listen to it before. I go, listen to it before. Listen to the whole thing. Hear the whole cycle of what you're going to do. They'd be like, oh. Then they go and they get their little things. They're like, oh, I'll put, I have this, and I'll get an essential oil. And they like, there it is. And it's like, now you know what's happening. Now you're going to do it. It does make the time go by incredibly quickly. Yes. I don't listen to them all the time now, but I was doing it in the beginning when I was like, ooh.
Well, now you've got me memorized.
Oh yeah, now it's just all there, and I'm outside and I see the whole thing, and the trees and the birds. And my biggest stressor is that there's usually like an ambulance or like a leaf blower, and I'm like, really? Like honestly, it's like
the other day with that leaf blower, what is it they're doing? Like, why does it take 3 days to leaf blow something? Anyway,
it's
another conversation.
It's a thing. It's a definite thing. So. In recap, just physiologically, you guys, for those who are listening, basically she self-modulated an autoimmune diagnosis. But so there was immune modulation. We pay a lot of money in drugs and peptides to do that. She modulated basically a low methylation, high histamine disorder. Many of you are dealing with that. That was all done through the cold. Do you deal with food restriction now? Are you able to? Yeah.
I became allergic to eggs at 32. And as of 4 months ago, I am no longer allergic to eggs. I am here to show you that whatever it is that is offending you, you can become stronger.
Awesome. Because that is what I tell people. Like the real treatment ultimately isn't that you're stuck not eating these things. Like we may have to pull everything back while we're healing and dealing with figuring out what's going on, why the histamine is through the roof, why we're having this, to balance methylation and all this stuff. And, you may be the first person I've heard. Now, again, you were taking some supplements, you were doing things. So I know they were trying to move and support you when you were able to take yourself off. So it's not that they weren't giving you methylation support. I'm assuming there were definitely some things in there that were doing some things trying to help modulate, but that you're able to maintain all of this. You are healed. It's done. And this is what you do, and not having to take 8,000 things. It becomes very overwhelming for patients. I understand that. And that's incredibly potent for me to hear, because I deal with these things are hard and they take a long time. And it's like, wait, can the cold really do? I'm even sitting here like, seriously? Like, that's super exciting. And I have to learn to get my pitch better, because many patients they'll tell me things like, you're my last hope. crying and things. And then on the next appointment, when I say, this is what we're going to, oh, I can't do that. Oh no. You want me to look at the sun and go in the cold? And I'm like, I don't know what to say right now. Like, what do you'd rather take these 87 supplements and the meds still? I mean,
And not
right?
get better. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tricky. So her YouTube, you guys, the setup, the way those meditations are very, very helpful. Go there, they have a lot of just like educational, also lectures on there for your business partner.
Yep.
PhD guy. What's his name? Is it
Tom?
Is he the
Tom
guy?
Seeger.
Okay. Yeah, he's often, in there talking.
Yeah.
I'm always impressed he can talk that intelligently, that in the cold.
Oh,
Because I just did it the other day and it was hard. It was definitely hard for me to keep talking. I had to be like,
he's had a lot of practice.
Yeah, it was good. And now the training, what's the situation with that?
So I do plan on hosting workshops in person in 2022. I've not yet released any 2022 dates yet, but I am working on that. I am also working on offering the Morozko Method as an online course. So you can become a certified guide by taking the online course. So I'm in the process of working on that to hopefully to be released very soon. You can also find me on Mighty Networks under the Morozko Method. So you can join us on Mighty Networks under the Morozko Method. Ask your questions. Leave them there. I will get to them and answer them. So everything that you want to know about cold, if I don't know the answer, I know people to go to get the answers. So follow us on the Morozko Method on Mighty Networks. You can also follow me on my Instagram, Adrienne_Jezick and Morozko Forge, to find out a lot of the answers to the questions that I pulled up here. They're already on Morozko Forge Instagram, but you can also reach out to me directly. I live to talk all things cold and often do until I'm blue in the face. So.
Oh, bump. That was good. That was a pun, and I appreciate it. Well, I appreciate you approaching it this way and taking it a step further to say, okay, how can I actually, to synthesize everything you've learned, right? Let me bring this and let me bring that in. And this is what worked for me and maybe it'll work for others. I haven't experienced the full method necessarily with you, right? But I mean, I've played the thing and I've banged my own bolt. I'm like, okay, hit it and I'm gone. I'm always doing it by myself. I do look forward to doing it in person with you in a group.
It's gonna happen.
I'm excited about that.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Rimka.
Thank you.
This was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for, and for the Forge. And, you guys, there's a lot of ways to do this at home. They range from my $60 tub to their outstanding thing and many things in between. There's pros and cons to all the devices. And you do your own research. But I know people who have eventually made the investment and have one at home, they're like, it's a total game changer. It's not easy to get 100 pounds of ice to get it that's about what you need to get it dropped down, and it's a pain. I'm just going to tell the truth. So if you're in a colder environment, like when this gets warmer here in Atlanta, this is not going to be so easy for me. I know I'm going to have to do an upgrade because I'm like, I can't go buy 100 pounds of ice every day. It's going to be nuts. It's too hot.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well,
thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye,
everyone.